Now, my name is Paul Wady. How I got diagnosed autistic, you can look up on the internet. It happened at the end of 2004 when I was 41. Up to that point, I had been a low to average intelligence, hyperactive comedian, and was often regarded as a pleasant nutter. Then I got arrested in a cinema, defending my friends to these nasty kids who lied about us. By the time my mate and I had been acquitted of common assault, and he's my oldest school friend from when I was 10, I had had a diagnosis for autism. I didn't know I had it. And I'm very glad to say I was just called autistic, because I do not like the term Asperger's syndrome. I think it's a snob term for people who want to, oh, I'm not autistic, I'm Asperger's. It's like being a gay man and saying, well, I'm not camp or anything, I've got loads of female friends. No, you're just on the spectrum, and all else is how much you can look like something you're not. It's all relative language. It's like internal materialism. Already, I've defined a snobbery in autism, and I don't like that. I devoted my life to being aligned with my own reality thereafter, because I spent the whole 30s in a Buddhist movement. The result is all this spectacular narcissistic egomania. I mean, I've got the t-shirt, I've written the book, I've married an A-level chemistry teacher who's on the spectrum. We met each other within a few months of diagnosis. What the hell else do you have to do to be autistic? Marrying a science teacher. All of this is advocacy. It exists because I couldn't find anything else like it in the world. First thing I did was write this book called Guerilla Aspies. Teaches autistic people to bully, seduce, manipulate, and coerce. That's right, it step by step teaches you to be a neurotypical, and in the reverse, it teaches autistic people what it's like with all the masking we do, and all the lying, and all the pretending to be not autistic. This is my solo show called Guerilla Aspies as well, which converts audiences to autism. It's in its 4th year in the Edinburgh Festival. I did it in New York the other month. I've done it in Ireland, in Dublin, and it's going into its 4th year. Again, its values as a historic entity, something that exists with a certain rock and roll contemporary attitude for autistic people. Then I started the world's only entirely autistic theatre company, Stealth Aspies. One of us, Janine Booth, actually wrote the Labour Party's Neurodiversity Manifesto. I've been selling her books out there. There were 5 of us in the first show last year, 4 of us this year, although Janine can't make it, sadly, for a huge amount of responsibility. And we call it Stealth Aspies for reasons you're going to hear in this talk about how much a lot of us have to mask, and also the nature of autism itself not being autism. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to take the ground away from under you. Right, there are many different communities in the so-called autistic spectrum. That's right, there's actually loads of different factions who all appear to be opposing each other, arguing with each other, and hardly working with each other. There's the autistics defined in relation to how well they can look normal, which is the high or low functioning. Is anyone here a really high functioner? Oh, are you all low functioners? How the hell, yeah, exactly. How do you like being called that? Well, we get that all the time. Of course, it's relative to every single situation you meet. Your IQ changes. There's different kinds of intelligence, different situations. It varies all the time, each day. And yet autistic people get tired with this high and low functioning thing. The principle being, I'm on top of my autistic nature. The people whose natures are on top of them are technically disabled by them compared to non-autistic people, because it's all relative. It's all relative to something you're not, which is neurotypical. Okay, it's like women always being compared to men, gay people always being compared to so-called heterosexuals, like that's not on the spectrum. We know full well gender and sexuality on the spectrum. That's one camp anyway. Autistics defined in relation to how much their natures are on top of them, people are relatively, as I said, handicapped. Then we've got another group, parents and family not on the spectrum but supporting and representing, a whole mafia in themselves with their own opinions and projections and way of seeing things. Some sympathetic to these groups, some not. Some very aggressive to people like myself who seem to think that in what I'm doing, right, it will take away support services for their handicapped kids. How? What is it? My God, Paul Wady's giving a talk in Birmingham. We've got to take away all the support services in the area because this guy is autistic and he's relatively able to do stuff. Well, how well do you have to do stuff to be okay in life? I can't juggle. I can ride a bike, but I can't juggle. What is this? What is the standard of competency to be an average human being, citizen in our society? It never gets defined. And then there's the support, medical, social services and academics. There's another group telling autistic people all about autistic people, saying what they think. This is what you are. You're a disease and a disorder. Oh, cheers. You know, it's what my wife and I, it's what, yeah, we have empathy for our own kind. It is a fact autistic people have empathy for their own kind, yeah? And we are very offended when we're told we've got a bloody disease and a disorder. Are we talking about the same thing? What do we mean? A definition of the archetypal child disabled by autism. Exactly, does a runny nose and a cough mean the same thing the world over? When we come here at the Autism Show, talk about autism, actually, we should all know it's not a properly and entirely defined thing in science. Let me take you through the different stages, right? Stage 1, a child shows introversion. They lack empathy to others and are self-centered. Child is just regarded as disabled due to relative dysfunctionality because they're not doing what we understand as neurotypical very well. Parents seek a clinical diagnosis. Child qualifies for a diagnosis of autism, having the characteristics of the condition. This is decided arbitrarily through observation of their behavior. It's watching people and their behaviors. There's no tissue tests. There are MRI scans, but what do they tell you? Exactly. Brain scans are in their infancy. They can show differences in brains, but what they really are is a projected and arbitrary judgment. People could be projecting their opinions onto the brain scans. Child get labeled autistic. Right, then, autism is blamed for the child's relative dysfunctionality, a terrible ruiner of families. So you see, you've got this bogey creature created from this process of an autism diagnosis. You can get the same kind of sort of OCD, ADHD sensitivities from brain crashes in cars. This was being researched in a London University and UCL many years ago. I haven't found out what they found out about that, but there were coincidental characteristics, you see. So we've got to be careful. I know I'm part of a hereditary bloodline because of my father, my half-sister on my mother's side. My wife knows it was her father, and all the autistic people I know can name at least one member of the family on one side. We've got to be careful. Thus we arrive at the child as autism, which has caused its behaviour in nature. May not be the same thing. Other childhood conditions have been noted going to clinical decline and extinction. This is the theme of my talk. Beware, beware, keep an open mind, okay? Rise of the Guerilla. An identity is a large battleground. We've got a lot of trouble going on right now. We have biological terrorists trying to stigmatise vaccines, saying they're into vaccine safety in order to bring about epidemics. And what will that lead to, ladies and gentlemen? That's right, compulsory vaccination. What else are the anti-vaxxers going to achieve in the long run but compulsory vaccination? I love these guys. Okay, Sesame Street's Julia shouldn't be on TV, autistics shouldn't be normalised in public. We're getting these people like Jenny McCarthy, Katie Wright, saying that in the media. It's like saying women should not be given the vote. They've got their fathers and their husbands to do it. Do you know who said that? Winston Churchill said that, okay? Yeah, we've all been there before, and that's another thing. Feminism, a women's rights movement, and LGBTI, the perspectives and thinking and the ways of seeing our society, the conceptual tools those groups created in the 20th century, well, Mary Shelley, Mary Wollstonecraft, and they've developed, we as autistic people are now using for our own self-advocacy as a minority and as a group. And then we've got the curebees. You know, you don't suffer enough, you're not like my child, you don't represent autism. Because the concept of autism is somebody who's severely disabled, and that's right, the nature's on top of them, they're restrained and trapped by the elements, the OCD, ADHD, control them. Autistic people like myself, it's been a lifetime battle. I didn't know I was autistic, I was 41. A battle to get on top of the different elements of yourself, to be something you're not, to function and relate and walk the walk and talk the talk. Tell me, ladies, don't you love a gender patronistic term? When you walk in a room with certain situations, you stop being you and you start being utterly female. You go in another room, you don't have any gender orientation. You go in another situation, you're one of the boys because of the way the ethos is. You go in another situation, you've got an orientation that you can't relate to anything else. Yeah, that's just on gender ID alone. Exactly. These things are fluid. Autistic and proud. We are people, human rights, civil rights, no abuse, actually autistic. This is the movement which, I don't know, I was 41, I got a diagnosis and I joined these social groups in 2004 and that was it. I got inducted into this world, having a big mouth and thinking this is what it all led to. I ended up part of this world. Right, we are either, now there's two models of being autistic, two definite models. Either neurotypical with neurodiverse elements such as dyspraxia, ADHD, OCD, okay? Model where we are disordered and suffer from an autism, or are a person with autism. So what happened is you were okay, something went wrong and you got this condition. Like the number of people I met who say, I've got dyslexia. Dyslexic people have MRI scans. And whereas a non-dyslexic brain would be doing like 10, 20 computations, our brains are doing like 300. Coping, masking. It's a fine example of that. Or we are autistic overall, and you're like, well, what varies is the extent we are born with elements such as dyslexia, ADHD, OCD, and how well we can handle them. What that means is you're born with the overall set of OCD, ADHD, sensitivity, dyspraxia. But how much do you handle it? So you have this much ADHD in my case, this much OCD in this case, this much dyspraxia, this much sensitivity. In my wife's case, there's a lot of dyspraxia. Other people I know got a huge amount of OCD. Some people have got a lot of sensitivity issues, right? So you're born with this profile. And then how much can you get on top of it? If you do any kind of clinical reading, you go in the library in the National Autistic Society where I work. It's got the biggest library in Western Europe. Nobody seems to talk about studying how well autistic people are so handling their natures in relation to the world and what they have to do, that you couldn't tell they've got these different elements of autism. Exactly, there doesn't seem to be a science that can relate to that yet. As has been said in one talk, try to hold both definitions as true as once. That's my message. Everything I've talked about so far, all these different, believe them all. Because everyone's going to come in and say, this is autism, that is autism. No, please, I beg you, keep such an open mind that you keep all your options open. Because for some reason, there's all these people in the world of autism, it's one thing, it's another. No, just keep it all open, because we're in the dark ages here. By the end of this century, I think we're going to be talking about all sorts of different brain types, bloodlines and families of different brain types as really defining humanity. We know gender and sexuality are on a spectrum. It's like bodies, purity. Guys, sex, no sex before marriage, for goodness sake. Purity of the human race, we're past all that. We've got to think the same way with the brain, this normal, abnormal model. It's naive, okay? Ha-ha! So you see, this is the slide that I've just explained. It's a relative, not absolute term, defined by arbitrary judgments, backed up by observations, outside in, and the observations, beliefs of the non-autistic. Oh yeah, did I mention the fact that Park is over there, Participatory Autism Research Collective? That is all these autistic people who are researchers, actually informing research, because previously everything you've been reading, everything you've accepted was written by non-autistic people. It's like women's studies, books on women, they're all written by men. And then one day, like Dr. Damien Milton, who organised this, loads of people, doctors, professors, they're turning up, they're on the spectrum, and they're working from the inside out. Yeah, it's like, we know what we're talking about, and it's causing nothing but trouble. Okay, enshrined in academia, medical literature, even autistic people argue about how to define the spectrum. Yet we do actually. Is it neurodiversity, neurotypicality, neuroatypicality? Okay, I'll give you a quick rundown. The whole world's neurodiverse. We are the neuroatypical to this great diversity. And inside that you get different defined conditions, which in the future might not exist, but now we've got ADHD, we've got OCD. Okay, some autistic people are more mature and able in life than others. What is also never taken into account is maturity, actual adult maturity in autistic people. You never read about that. We're never calibrated in those terms, nor are we considered about in terms of personality and individual character. If you watch that atypical TV series on Netflix, did anyone manage to sit through that bastard thing? Excuse my language. The central character is either a clown or a tragedy figure. He doesn't actually have any personality apart from all these, I have a series of preset cliches. And don't start me on that A word, that pity porn, parent porn program on BBC One. I couldn't look at the second series. The sooner they out the Christopher Eccleston character as being on the spectrum, the better. It was just pathetic. Although they did put one fella in the second series who is actually autistic as an actor. Look, we've got one. Hello, yeah, all right. I wonder how many scenes he had. I believe we need to always remember that all definitions of frames of reference may one day be superseded and scrapped. Radical stuff. Okay, the different attitudes to autism that can be found in different definitions. Okay, America, home of eugenicism, the strong and the weak, winners and losers, healthy and unhealthy. National Institute of Mental Health. Oh, by the way, you do know autistic people only exist inside of mental health and disability. We ain't got no culture anywhere else. So, according to Steve Silverman, the author of Neurotribes, greatest book in the world, apart from mine, he says we took Silicon Valley years ago. And he also said we took over a little organization called NASA. He says autistic people rule NASA. I was nearly in tears. I met him. He's taught books. He's a lovely guy. Okay, this is how the National Institute of Mental Health define being autistic. Okay, overview. Hold on to your seats. Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disorder that affects communication and behaviour. All the bloody people I met in Doctor Who fandom, all those Trekkies out there, are you affected? Although autism can be diagnosed at any age, it is said to be a developmental disorder because symptoms generally appear in the first 2 years of life. What my marriage is based on a disorder and symptoms. Oh, cheers, yeah. Autistica, the good guys, say autism is a spectrum of developmental conditions. Every autistic person is different. Some are able to learn, live and work independently, but may have learning differences or co-occurring mental conditions that require specialist support. So we got two definitions for the same thing. Why? Why? Are there two attitudes? Was one created by people who don't like us? Who could only define our existence in terms of people whose autism was on top of them? Makes you think, doesn't it? Dr. Luke Bearden. Dr. Luke says the concept that all people with autism are disordered, impaired, or somehow lesser is one that needs to be challenged. Having worked closely with people with autism for more than 20 years, I've had the pleasure of meeting many hugely intelligent, insightful, kind, caring, skilled, loyal autistic individuals, including two of my doctoral students, not to mention me, who both graduated successfully and are now prominent in their respective fields. You know why that is? Because when you're calibrated as an autistic people, you've always got to prove stuff. You've got to have qualifications. Maybe you've got to have good looks and features. Maybe science qualifications. You've got to be good at something. You've got to be able to handle stuff. Because it's all this frame of reference that isn't entirely appropriate for people for whom the world overwhelms. Have you noticed this? It's a form of internal materialism. You're not allowed to simply be autistic. Well, you are if you go to my show. If you go to Autscape, for example, the yearly conference for autistic people, I went to the first two, 2005 and 6. Then you can just be autistic. You can stim with other people. It's fantastic, you see. But all the rest of the world, you've always got to be able to, And this is the point I'm doing. Attitudes to autistic people in medical definitions appear to still be irrelevant. You can call us anything you like. The people around here, they call it, it's disease, disorder. Oh, cheers, right, my father had it, I had it, it's something bonded, we related intimately. My wife and I love them more than I love myself. We have that depth of relating. My best mate from school, now, we've known each other 44 years. Stealth Aspies, many of us do not look, sound and act and live the way the lives many of us thought you were supposed to when you were autistic. Yeah, eccentrics, experts, addicts and the ill. Autistics assuming personalities and lifestyles that hide their autistic natures. Yeah, you think about it, these people you've met, the number of people I've had conversations with coming back from training for the NAS, and I meet fellas and women on train platforms who are staff, and they're obviously on the spectrum because all they do is going on about training. They have this empathy for me, they don't know why. It's brilliant! Train spotters, this explains where autism comes from in history, the concept never used to exist before the 20th century. So how are we supposed to be spotted? We must get killed off if we were relatively vulnerable, or become monks and nuns, the village idiots. We used to be idiots put in asylums, just plain died off. Yeah, the idiots. The wild boy of Avignon, look him up. He was about 2-3 centuries ago. He was a feral child, had his own language, lived on grass, stuff like that. Or monks and nuns, priests and scholars. They're everywhere. The Larry Grayson effect. This man was deeply loved for decades. He was on the BBC. He was a comedian. Shut that door. He was as camp as hell. He talked about my friend Everard. He ended up taking over the Generation game, which was peak time Saturday night viewing in the 70s and 80s, from, who's the fella who took it over from, Dave? Who's the guy who used to run the Generation game? Bruce Forsyth, good game, didn't you do well? And people were literally going, he's not gay. I mean, he's living with a man. People going, he's not gay. I saw a documentary on him. You'd look at him and you'd watch him being as camp as hell and you're like, he's not gay, is he gay? He's not gay. Saga Noren, it is BBC, it is 9 o'clock, it is Saturday night, peak viewing. Series 4 is on of the Scandi drama The Bridge. Who is the lead in this show? Who is the one character played by Sophia Helen has carried it all through? An autistic woman. An autistic woman. There's no way in hell. Some bloody moron was interviewed by one of the newspapers and said, well, it is possible, judging by the way she behaves, that she might possibly be on the autistic spectrum. They can't handle it. It's the Larry Grayson effect. There's a gay man in front of you, you can't see them. There is an autistic woman in the lead of this show, absolutely brilliant, and they can't see her. It's like she's not there. People are giving the game away now that there is, but they can't even articulate it in the media. This extraordinary woman living her life on her terms is on the spectrum, because you can't have people like that. That'll be Autism Speaks helicopter, buzzing the building. They know I'm on. Those fiends. Right, the Saga effect. The world can't quite get its head around people like myself saying stuff like this. Okay, how did I survive? The main issue I faced in my life is the fear of others and what they may do to me. That's why I ended up overcompensating and giving talks like this, because I'm from Liverpool and I wouldn't accept being beaten down by the world, and I've ended up this almighty drama queen. Human interactions and dialogues are full of dangers for me. I've been very easily overwhelmed and caught out as unable to relate. This aspect of me has been used for sport and abused, and to abuse me in many different and abstract ways. Oh, you get that from all of us, the pity, but oh, I've had a terrible time. Of course you did. You couldn't relate to the school kids. Of course you did. You couldn't relate to other people. Of course you're going to get a terrible time. The world is not nice, you know. But I have not had to fear for mental illness and severe disorder of mind, because I always recovered. I think there's a lot of us out there are like that. It's like every day you get small things of body and mind that injure you. But I have this capacity to heal. I don't know how much longer it's going to go on. I'm in my 50s. I feel relatively vulnerable to the world now. So I'm married, got a job, and a secure scenario. If that changes, I may actually find myself relatively undermined and vulnerable. I don't know. But I now know, looking back at myself, this extraordinary capacity to survive. I spent all my 30s in a Buddhist movement, and that definitely helped. Okay, this seems to be my secret. That's why I'm here. Most of us are not like that. We're only human. We have a huge amount to step up to. We have a huge amount. As ordinary autistic people, ask any woman who's trying to go in for a competitive industry in the 21st century. Now ask their mothers what it was like. All the women on my dad's side of the family had extraordinary jobs and lived in different parts of the world. One was a single mum, worked in the United Nations in New York for 34 years. What, did they have an easy time in the 60s and 70s? Exactly. We all know the stories now, but you can imagine what my life's been like. All of our lives who are autistic are like that. We have a hell of a time. Okay, so this is the last slide. Guerilla Aspies, the emergence of a new subculture, a reaction to the neurotypical culture. Okay, independent from the neurotypical majority, has its own Aspie spaces and conventions such as Autscape, and the shows we do, one thing about them is an autistic space. I talk to the audience during my solo show, and in the shows the audience talk to us at the end. Social groups and private garaging, marriages and families too. You get a whole environments that are neurodiverse. Positive identity and self-supporting community. This is the reality now. Find us, join us, communicate with us on the internet. Marvelous. Politically active, National Autistic Task Force. Dr. Damien Milton, who runs this hub, he runs the Participatory Autism Research Collective. He also runs the National Autistic Task Force. The woman who should be running everything but doesn't want to, so she's like the second, only because she is Dr. Dinah Murray, who's an amazing woman. People don't know about Dinah and everything she's achieved. I love her. There's a woman who started a charity called DANDA, which was Dyspraxia and Neurodiversity Alliance, who died of cancer. I can't remember her name, I can see her face. But she too was a trailblazer from the late 90s. Mary Coley, she's gone now. There's people like that. Jim Sinclair, 1993, he wrote a piece called Don't Mourn for Us. I recorded it, put it on YouTube. You've got to hear Don't Mourn for Us. So we've got these leaders. We've got Autistic Self-Advocacy Network in America, Aspies Deutschland, yeah. Autistic UK is now a real thing. It was originally started by a degenerate alcoholic with a huge criminal record in order to fleece people, but he's now been impeached from his own organisation and is actually a functional organisation, Autistic UK, out there trying to find its feet. But the bad guy, I call him Moriarty, he's still running around trying to get his beer money from the, you know all about that, from the autistic scene. Yeah, we've got good guys, we've got bad guys, we've got characters, you know. Okay, and it's messed up. Okay, and there's Stealth Aspies Theatre Company. I started that 2 years ago. If you go on Stealth Aspies Twitter, we've got survey links. You fill in the surveys about your experience, we will perform them. We perform the experiences of autistic people. We've got a second one out for mums on the spectrum, because it's something I got involved in a few months ago. Community is coming. Okay, thank you very much. That's the talk. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, is there any questions before I get dragged off?